So what even is an adaptation? Taking one thing and morphing it, perhaps even against its very will, to fit snugly into the mold of another. That's the point, you know? You could just enjoy the thing as it is. Is there truly a point in repurposing it at all to begin with?
I mean, yeah, obviously. Have you seen Evan Tuna packets? You can't just stop with the packets. I gotta have the canned version too.
The second generation of games, you know, where things actually got kinda interesting, is where we start to see movie licensed games really starting off, but not in the way you'd probably expect. See, most people consider the Atari 2600 to be the first real game console, or at least the first really successful one, the sort of grandfather of the entire gaming industry in a way, and it's more or less true, so naturally you'd think, yeah, that's where we're gonna see our first movie licensed game ever, but no, actually, oddly enough, the first ever game based on a movie would appear in the form of 1979 Star Trek Phaser Strike on the Milton Bradley Microvision, because nothing screams, I'm an attention-starved middle child, quite like owning a Milton Bradley Microvision does.
Alright, firstly, I have never been a Star Trek guy. I've always been a big Star Wars fan as far back as I can remember. And you know the rules. You can be a Star Wars fan, or you can be a Star Trek fan, but if you're both, you're just a straight-up asshole.
Don't get me wrong, I have tried. I tried watching Star Trek the motion picture once, but I just got bored and confused 20 minutes in, so I put Phantom Menace on instead. Had a much better time there. So yeah, you can definitely say I'm not experienced enough with Star Trek to talk about Phaser Strike, but I mean, I don't think I really need to be. Like, come on, look at this. This game is considered to be the first movie licensed game ever because, well, it was released in conjunction with Star Trek the motion picture. Well, like, let's be real here. This isn't Star Trek. All this is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of generic video game. You're just a block shooting another block with a block and a block. And yeah, I know you're supposed to use the power of imagination like a lot of these older games required you to make this a more grand experience, but no, this could be any generic video game. In fact, a year or so after this game came out, the Star Trek name was dropped from the title and this became its own thing, which is really what it was all along, for being honest. So in terms of adapting a movie, this is horrible. Like, what do you expect from the Microvision? But in terms of being a game on its own, though, I mean, you kind of have to give older games like this, especially handheld ones, a little bit more leeway. Again, this was 1979, and it's a fine little arcade game, all things considered, so it's just mediocrely mid on my patented 8-nugget grading scale. Phaser Strike earns a solid 4 out of 8 nuggets. Like, if I was a kid in the early 80s, I could probably see myself spending some quality time with this one, but outside of that, not really. But you know what I couldn't see myself getting quality time out of? 1980, just that whole year. No movie licensed games released at all. Like, is nothing even sacred to you people anymore? Same goes for 1981, another terrible year offering nothing much to live for. But chin up, knuckle chuckers, because that isn't at all to say for 1982, the year we'd see 7 brand shining new movie licensed games. Like, what's with that? Why? Why was there this 3-year period of beautiful world peace until bang bang bang, 7 kidney stones?
As strange as it is, there actually was a valid reason for this. You see, movie licensed games always seem to sort of mirror the state of the movies that released alongside them, which was nowhere more obvious than the 1980s. You see all these sci-fi action blockbusters taking off, and the games can sort of, at this point, actually mirror and imitate the things you see on screen. And it all makes sense because it all makes money. And let's not kid ourselves, that's the ultimate goal here. The plan is basing your game off a popular film for instant success, and that's never had any drawbacks whatsoever in any way at all. Fun fact, did you know that Sonic the Hedgehog had a rough transition into 3D?
The first example I think of here is Alien on Atari 2600. Now, Alien is considered to be one of the greatest science fiction flicks of all time. I mean, it's a true masterclass in old school, pants pissy, scares your kids so bad they need to sleep in their mom's bed horror. Coming to us straight from Ridley Scott, one of cinema's all-time best directors, but that's only half the story. The other half, hidden beneath the surface, is something much darker, something evil, depraved, something deeply sinister to its very core.
I gotta go call my mom.
Yeah, they really just took Alien and made it into a Pac-Man knockoff. Oh, a really bad one. So here's the thing. Yeah, of course, it'd be really stupid to expect an accurate adaptation of Alien in 1982 with the technology they had, even in terms of tone and style or story, because those things didn't really exist in the early 80s as far as games go. But you're telling me the devs couldn't have even bothered trying to make something original, something fresh? Like, yeah, artistic inspiration is one thing, but I mean, look at this. It's Clover Valley Pac-Man. That's what this is. At that point, like, why even try adapting Alien? This shit is asinine. I'm talking 9 whole asses. 2 out of 8 nuggets, but hey, to be fair, at least it's better than the actual Pac-Man game on Atari 2600, which, speaking of which, breaking news, Nimrod, E.T. bombed. Like, really, really, really bombed. Bad. This game is probably the single most overhyped video game of all time. Everyone and their alcoholic stepmom and their alcoholic stepmom before them have had it bludgeoned and bludgeoned to their heads to death and back that this game is what supposedly caused the great Atari shock or gaming crash of 1983, that it was responsible for the US losing interest in gaming, that it was the reason the dollar store's bathrooms are closed all the time, that overall, it's the very trabant of video games. Honestly, the whole gaming crash of 83 thing is all just way over-exaggerated, and it's far and away one of the most annoying gamer bro trivia facts out there. Like, yeah, sure, the popularity of video games, and specifically consoles, did take a hit, and as it should have. These companies, they would egotistically hype up their games as being something really spectacular and profound, only for us to discover that they were way worse and way lamer than advertised in the end, and they deserved exactly what they got. But it's not like video games just died until Nintendo decided to revive the medium out of the kindness of their bleeding hearts or anything. Like, home computers were still fairly popular until the NES came out, and they kinda kept gaming alive here in the States, plus it's not like gaming ever really went out of style in Japan anyway.
Regardless, it's really easy to pin the blame for the whole Atari shock situation on ET, though not very accurate. And that's not to say it didn't play any role at all. It did disappoint a lot of people when it came out, and obviously it filled all those landfills or whatever. Not to mention, 700,000 copies of the game were returned shortly after their release. But looking at all the Atari games we had that falsely advertised themselves as being this cool big thing, it's like, what really separates ET from that? I've never honestly understood that. It looks exactly the same, which doesn't excuse ET, it's still a piece of garbage, but like, just because it stinks doesn't make it special. It's still garbage.
For some reason, people thought that this would be the breakthrough game, that this would be the one that could finally prove everyone wrong about adaptations, that this would be the one that would justify movie licensed games forever. And there was a ton of hype leading up to the game's release for the holiday season, but it's like, have you ever even seen an Atari 2600 game? People were setting this game up for failure from the very start. And in terms of development, the developers are only given 5 measly weeks to make the game for the Christmas deadline, and with the massive marketing behind ET pushing it as this big, innovative adaptation, people were setting this game up for failure from the very start. The guys in charge didn't have much faith in the game's build either, like Steven Spielberg himself apparently asked the programmers if they could make it more similar to Pac-Man. What the fuck is it with you guys? And as for the game itself, it's confusing, it's poorly put together, and it has really, really little to do with the movie. Again, it's bad, but like, it's par for the course Atari bad. All it is another overhyped game that didn't live up to the marketing, which is really why I think the Atari shock happened. People didn't get sick of video games, they didn't want to stop playing them, they just lost faith in the business, and if it was going to keep going the way that it was at the time, rightfully so. And if there's a single game responsible for this, I don't think it's this one. It's Pac-Man on Atari 2600. Now don't get me wrong, I love Pac-Man. I am obsessed with Pac-Man. Pac-Man Championship Edition is one of my all-time favorite games. My favorite arcade game ever is Miss Pac-Man. Pac-Man's my soulmate. I mean, we share the same birthday for crying out loud. And honestly, Pac-Man's the only reason the color yellow is even worth looking at. And I just think he's cool. I love his games. I love his aesthetic. I love that his wife's cheating on him with Annoyed. He's awesome. But this is just slanderous buffoonery. And as an American goddamn citizen, I will not stand for it. Pac-Man 2600, just like E.T., it also came out in 1982, and just like E.T., it released on the Atari 2600, and just like E.T., it absolutely bombed. Like, really, really bombed. Bad. It's awful. It sucks so bad. People took this baby home thinking it'd be just like the arcade game, only to be met with a dirty left hook. Point being, if anything, this was the straw that broke the abominable Atari camel's back, not this one, even though it did certainly play its role. So removed from the gaming crash drama, E.T. is a bad game, but nothing much more than that. There's nothing really special about its badness, so that's a 3 out of 8 nugs for me. But hey, in E.T.'s defense, at least this sprite looks like E.T. Can't say that about Alien. Or Pac-Man. In terms of other movie-based games for the Atari 2600 released in 1982, it turns out it isn't all just doom, gloom, and unspeakable abominations to mankind, because we've always got, here we go, Star Wars. You know the old saying, opinions are like assholes. Everybody fucking hates Star Wars. Most people have the same weird belief about this franchise. The Star Wars is nothing more than a soap opera but for guys, which is like, isn't that just WWE? But you can't deny that the controversy is crazy. You bring up Star Wars at the Thanksgiving dinner table, everyone goes flippin' loony. You got your OG trilogy supremacist aunt you've never really liked arguing with your open-minded stepson about Luke Skywalker's character in The Last Jedi. Your annoying younger brother won't stop spamming prequel quotes and memes the whole night, and then your weird meth addict cousin is off in the corner somewhere begging people to please God, give Star Wars Rebels a chance.
And now the trauma's back. And this is why we don't discuss religion at the dinner table.
But hey, back in the day, back in the golden days when there were just 2 and only 2 Star Wars films, things were way more simple, because by and large, pretty much everyone just agreed, yeah, Star Wars is heckin' cool. And that coolness was able to carry over really well, surprisingly, in what I consider to be the first ever good movie license game, The Empire Strikes Back on 2600. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking, but this game actually manages to look and feel like the opening battle from The Empire Strikes Back, with actually accurate sprites and music for once. This is Star Wars. By God, this is Star Wars, and you can tell. It is kind of lame that the emotional core of the film had to be just completely gutted from the thing, but unfortunately that's something that simply had to be done. Games were so primitive during this time that they couldn't really do stories without complete reliance on an instruction manual or something. This was that essential part of taking that original work and adapting it into this bold new medium, and for what it was, this game works. It's decent, it does what it sets out to do, and does it well. It's at least somewhat accurate to the movie or its aesthetics while adapting it well, and as a game itself, it's pretty alright. But you know what isn't not pretty alright? This game's prequel that released a year later, Star Wars. Again, nothing that saved the universe or anything, but for a video game in 1983, much less a Star Wars one, this is just way cool. It looks good, it plays good, and it accurately captures the feel and look of Star Wars perfectly, and actually feels playable compared to so many other Atari games. For a console to go and run a buttered piece of gluten-free toast without coughing and sputtering something awful, this game was actually really impressive for the Atari, and even by later game standards, it still holds up. Good on you, Mike Haley.
But imagine a bright, hopeful future. We didn't have to endlessly applaud games for barely running well and kind of looking okay. No, what if we had games that could go beyond just, holy shit, it actually started. It's Game of the Year material right there.
As film progressed through the 1980s, things got flashier. Almost gone was the culture-changing, down-to-earth cinema of the 70s, and now we had all these big action blockbusters filling the screen and filling it good. And from a cinephile's lens, this sucked. But alternatively, from a guy who likes explosions sometimes lens, oh, this was rad as all hell.
And at this point, video game consoles that could actually competently run games without having a schizophrenic breakdown every other second were finally made and were finally widely accessible, and it just felt like perfect timing, because for once, for the first time ever, what you saw in the games could really kind of live up to what you saw in the movies. Not perfectly, it didn't look great, it wasn't one-to-one, but the spirit of what you saw in the movies could be replicated for once. And this is just the symmetry you love to see movies and games get brought together in movie licensed games, for better and for worse.
But who doesn't love the third generation of game consoles, man? It's often remembered as one of gaming's best. I mean, we got the NES, And that was really good. The NES really was all that in a bag of chips, man, and I'd argue it still is. It's become the thing that kind of defined retro gaming, and it's easy to see why, because for seemingly the first time in gaming, there were actual quality standards Nintendo enforced. Game developers could only make 5 games per year for the console, so the false advertising that pissed people the hell off so much, I mean, it was still here, but at least it was greatly reduced, and most of all, games actually had to meet a certain level of quality to make it onto the NES. Geez, modern Nintendo could really learn a thing or two from the 80s. And that's why the NES really made it big. However, there were 2 other main consoles during the generation. That being said, one of them was the Atari 7800, so really there was only one other main console during this generation, that being the Sega Master System, and it was definitely there. The good old days back when Sega made hardware too. Yeah, so remember when I said the NES required its developers to say Nintendo exclusive? See, that kind of made things way worse for the other consoles, because the NES was a cultural phenomenon, so all the developers wanted their games on it so they could make a decent killing off their games, meaning that the only third-party games that made it onto the Master System were the ones that didn't live up to Nintendo's quality standard. And the only games made it onto the Atari 7800 were flippin' hate crimes. Now what does all this have to do with movie license games? For real.
It's like I've been saying, there's always been this sort of dogma that movie license games are just low-effort trash, and while a lot of those games that were bad did make it to the NES, it was the Master System that got the blunt of all of these terrible movie license games this time around.
For example, if you've ever needed 100% definitive proof that there is in fact no God, you could always play Rocky on Master System, which right off from the start, Rocky's one of the most inconsistent franchises in terms of sheer quality in my eyes. It's home to some of the greatest movies ever made, some of the worst, and Rocky IV in between it all. It's an emotional metaphor for going the distance and battling life, with the sports and boxing aspects really in the background of everything. The point being, Rocky as a series has gotten so many game adaptations, and I don't know if any of them ever truly worked. And the reason for that is, Rocky just simply isn't an action franchise. It's not like Star Wars or something where you can still strip the movies of their emotional core and they'll still work as video games. No. Rocky's core is the emotional stuff, should be the emotional stuff. And almost any action you get here is just boxing. It is really well shot. It's suspenseful boxing most of the time, but it's still just boxing. And translating that into any game is rough. But a Master System game of all things, with only 2 tiny little buttons, yeah, that's damn near impossible. But to Sega, impossibility ain't nothing but foreplay. Now to its credit, the graphics are pretty impressive for Master System, for 8-bit systems overall, and I think it's pretty funny that both this and Rocky on PS2 both use the same Rocky IV artwork that's just kinda cool. All this is shaping up to form a game that honestly wasn't half bad. It was just all the way bad. You jump into the game and you kick off training. It's just punching a bag by pushing the 2 buttons at your disposal.
I mean, honestly, why even deadlifting and just button mash? My testosterone has never been higher than it is this very moment.
Immediately, you're plopped into the final battle with Apollo Creed. Woof, that was fast.
Wow, I sure wish I could skip my personal struggles and just jump right to the pinnacle moment of my entire life right from the get-go.
The gameplay here is nothing special. You shuffle to the left, shuffle to the right, hit the 2 buttons to punch, whammo bammo. It's really basic and not super immersive. But to be totally fair, this controller does have a disability, so you can't judge it too hard. After you beat Apollo, you train, and on to the next opponent. Geez, this really is just Diet Punch-Out, isn't it? After you beat everyone, you get this ending cutscene. I take it back. The emotional investment here is off the charts. I don't know, man. It's not the worst movie license game, not the worst movie license game on Master System, not the worst Stallone movie license game on Master System, but overall the controls kind of suck, and if you get really good at just... The game only takes you about 20 minutes, maybe less to beat, and it absolutely fails at film accuracy other than its visuals, so it's not terrible, it's just pretty bad. 3 out of 8 here. But that being said, the graphics do look really good for the time, both on Master System and NES. I've always liked seeing these little sprite-based illustrations try to portray some big image. It's adorable. But I don't think I like this as much as Sylvester Stallone like the Sega Master System. Jeez, man, dude, what are you thinking, pal? Rambo is a game adaptation, ideally, is a match made in only the darkest pits of the heavens, because unlike Rocky or even something more action-based like Star Wars, Rambo is nothing but pure, unadulterated action and violence, and especially in the 80s, that translates just so painfully well into game form. I mean, these games were nothing but pew 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 and even a kaboom every once in a while if you're feeling foxy, so how could this possibly not work?
Like this.
Yeah, it turns out, not a great game. Surprised? You just run upwards and shoot at people, and the controls make it to where it never feels like you're aiming in the way you want to, and other than running and shooting, there's nothing here, so I would give this game a negative nugget score of being not so good of a game, But when you take into account that Rambo is nothing more than running or shooting, that alone boosts us up to one of the most accurate movie license games ever for capturing the film perfectly, so that alone makes us a totally serious 4 out of 8 nuggets.
So yeah, if we're judging movie license games based solely on what we got on the Sega Master System, then I guess the critics were right. They all are just a bunch of low-effort trash. But here's the thing, I think that I, as a person, have more credibility as a game console than the Sega Master System does. So I can say, yeah, this ain't it, buddy. This is.
And studios really took notice of the NES's crazy wild popularity in around 1986, 1987, and that's when the landfills of film adaptations started to pour in.
Now, as I said earlier, despite the NES's high-quality standard, there did still end up a good amount of low-quality trash on this thing, so let's check out the epitome apparent of low-effort trash in Karate Kid on NES. Why am I smiling? I shouldn't be smiling. I should be frowning. We should all be frowning because this exists.
Now, I like Rocky a lot. It's very, very good. Definitely in my top 3 film franchises. Karate Kid, meanwhile, is something I've never really given a moose send for, frankly. Like, it's fine, I guess, but to me, it's always just been Rocky, but for even younger kids. Seriously, same director and everything, look it up. But I totally get why so many people love it. It's just not my thing personally, and that's okay. Good, even. Having different tastes is a good thing. People like different flavors of tuna, and that's fine. It's not objectively bad, whatever that means, just because I don't like it. Now, the game, on the other hand, I don't want this shit on my hand. You know, say what you want about Karate Kid NES. It may be no Celeste, but it sure packs a pretty good chubby cherub if you're into that. The controls are just not good at all. For instance, if there's a universal law in gaming, it's that jumping can be almost any button. It can be B, it can be A, it can even be X for all I care, but it can never, and I mean ever, be up. And this game takes that role and does just unspeakably deplorable things to it. And the controls for combating an enemy are so awkward because the jump controls make it almost impossible to land a hit before you're knocked backwards. Even structurally, it's a really odd game. Like, it starts at the ending of the first movie with this tournament thing, which is like inexplicably easy, then all of a sudden, wham, you're thrust into the middle of the second film with a completely different side-scrolling playstyle rather than 1v1 combat, wherein you're beating up random guys needing their Ds and their Cs, and real quick, but I don't remember if there's an actual scene from Karate Kid Part 2 or not, but I would not be surprised if it was at all. Oh, and the game is now just randomly way harder and super unfair. I don't know why. Then you do basically the same level again, except for a typhoon consuming everything, which A, does give me an excuse to live out my childhood fantasy of kicking the absolute shit out of these birds, just like in the movie. In level 4, I don't even know what in God's green hell is going on. There are spirit people now. Okay, sure, why not? Then once you beat the stage, the game ends, and some old guy hits on you. Sure. If only. It's inconsistent when it comes to style and quality. The graphics they're just okay. The controls are bad, and it doesn't do much more than take weird out of context moments from the movies and plunk them in here. And if you're gonna make me go through the excruciating effort of actually playing your horrible game, I think the least you could do is give me some reward other than just having an old guy make a pass at me. I mean, come on, I can't even use the karate to defend myself here. 2 out of 8 nuggets.
But you know what does make for an excellent weapon to use against the elderly when they try to force themselves on you?
Well, I don't, but if I had to throw out a guess, I'd probably say, Jaws on NES. When it comes to having an opinion on Jaws, I am your guy. I know everything there is to know about Jaws. Top passionate Jaws fan here. I own 2 copies of Jaws on DVD like any real red, white, and blue-blooded American would. And hey, one of them's the collector's editions. Listen up, man. I get Jaws. I've never seen the movie, ever. Not once. I take it back. Maybe I'm not as believable as a human being as the Sega Master System. Jaws on NES is one of the video games on the NES, and I think that sums it up pretty darn well. If you had a giant bucket, fill it to the brim with 1,000 NES games, and you plucked out one game, this would be pretty well representative from the NES's library from best to worst. It's the balance between all things. It's the great equalizer. It's effing Jaws, man. You sail around in an overworld, you hunt a shark and shoot at it and collect things. It gets annoying sometimes when you lose unfairly, but oh shucks, golly gee, that's the NES. And then you win. A lot of people really hate this game. Some outright praise it, but honestly I think it's right there in the middle. This is a video game that exists and does a good job at doing that. So for me, it's mediocrely mid, 4 out of 8 nuggets. Never seen the movie, but from what I know, maybe it's accurate. Who's to say? I see a shark, I lose my brain cells just like 67 million other people. And just like all the people who bought Back to the Future on NES. I hope you like bad because you turn the game on and damn it, someone's got a case of the Rambos. You know, credits due here to LJN for trying to make an original-ish type of game here, but this auto-run style where you just have semi-control over your player, it is not at all fun to play. Gotta love that same 5-second ear grating music track that plays the entire game too.
this is the song Hitler killed himself to.
Back to the Future is one of the most beloved movies ever made, and that comes from its fun plot, its entertaining spectacle, and just how downright bizarre its story is. At this point, virtually everyone has mocked the film's weird-ass American Oedipus Rex premise, but hey, it worked, and the film is without question an iconic staple of Americana. I never really gave it the credit it deserved until more recently, but what I've come to realize over the years is, sure, it's not some deep masterwork of cinema or anything, but Back to the Future is essentially a perfect movie in the way it's crafted. Everything set up is fully paid off, every concept established is so thoroughly explored, every character and plot element and line of dialogue and every teeny tiny little detail has some sort of purpose and all connects so well with each other. It is, like I said, a perfect movie, and I really miss that iconic level of originality in the movies of today. I mean, we're so focused on Lego sequels and established IP that I don't think our generation really has icons in film that'll be remembered in quite the same way things like Back to the Future or Star Wars or Indiana Jones are now, or even back then. And maybe that's because of oversaturation, maybe that's because of a lack of gumption, maybe that's because creative voices in Hollywood are stifled, barely utilized, and are always at risk of being axed in favor of artificial techno slop, but I don't know, we have so many great and ambitious artists now creating great and ambitious things, but the mainstream almost always seems to be littered with cash grabs that only exist to make a few quick beans off of something else's success. Anyway, here's a 1989 cash grab that only exists to make a few quick beans out of something else's success. Is that a contributing factor to why people hate this game so much? I mean, yeah, probably, but the game really is that bad. You go around collecting clocks while avoiding everything under the sun. Bees, oil slicks, window repair guys, and even hula hoop girls. Jesus Christus, man, they're pulling out all the stops here. Avoid the fact that none of the throwing glass at bullies, none of the tossing bowling balls, none of the layout and design of the game, even down to the character sprite is accurate to the film it's supposedly based on by any seam of a stretch, much less the climax where you actually have to avoid lightning bolts, which is like the direct opposite of the film. And at the end of the day, the game is just really clunky. I think a lot of the inaccuracy could probably be forgiven if the game was actually playable, though by no means is that an excuse for the game's terrible creative decisions, but man, even simply controlling the character, jumping, aiming, avoiding enemies, it all just feels really wrong. This is the very definition of a 2 out of 8 nugget product, and all of this results in the type of game you'd only ever see sold in bundles, like an ES bundle, 8 hit games.
Oh yeah, it's a hit game alright.
But you know what also feels really wrong? The fact that Top Gun has like 15 games based on it and it alone before the sequel came out. Huh. I've honestly never been a huge Top Gun guy, but maybe that's just because my testosterone levels are really high in terms of lowness. I don't know. The NES game, though, is iconic, one of the system's best-selling games out there, but does something being a classic really mean it's actually any good? Well, the graphics and everything look really nice, and that's certainly a plus.
It really feels like I'm about to commit a bunch of war crimes against an impoverished nation on behalf of oil billionaires, you know?
Aside from that, nah, it's more or less just a simple flight simulator shooting game and nothing much else. Again, it looks kinda nice, but the gameplay isn't all that engaging or fun. It's mostly just kinda boring. And of course, it's iconic how tough it is to land the plane, but really, why is it so hard to land the damn plane? This isn't the fun, oh hey, I solved the puzzle hard. It's the I hate this and want to give up because it is way too unfair kinda hard. Ultimately, this is yet another mediocrely mid game, but thankfully things started to shape up for movie licensed games on NES soon after this.
You can tell as time marched forward that movie licensed games started to become something more, something greater than they were before. Like up until the mid-80s, they were just hastily thrown together hodgepodges of garbage just to capitalize off of film success. But you can tell that slowly but surely, game developers really poured their hearts out trying to make great adaptations. With effort and care and attention to detail, they would take a movie, they would take what worked in it, and they would adapt that material into another medium. They would form a whole new work of art entirely. It wasn't just some greedy CEO sitting back and slapping the Make Pac-Man Go button anymore, because frankly, that just didn't work anymore. I mean, I'd argue it didn't work to begin with, but that's not the point. What mattered is that these people really cared about trying to make something great. They really cared about taking what worked and changing what needed to be changed to fit this new medium to make something worth remembering.
And I don't think that's any more obvious than one NES game specifically, far and away one of the best games on the entire platform. Batman the video game. It was made by Sunsoft, which nowadays mostly just re-releases Famicom games, fun fact, and it was based on the 1989 film Batman. Not Batman the movie, not Batman 89, not the Batman, it's Batman, it's just called Batman, which is part of the reason I consider this to be kind of the definitive Batman experience cinematically. I'm the kind of guy who loves every version of Batman. Well, almost every version of Batman. I love them all almost equally, but we wouldn't have the modern, darker take on the character if not for this film, which managed to make dark Batman mainstream in a time where if you'd ask some ordinary Steve on the street about Batman, they'd probably babble something about shark repellent. And don't get me wrong, I love Adam West Batman. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite things ever, but just like all the good things in life, Batman 66 is like Pac-Man. I love them both dearly, but God, I'm kind of glad we evolved. I ultimately don't think the impact Batman had on culture can be denied. It paved a way forward both for action flicks and for the Batman mythos and character by providing a tightly knit, well-rounded film that encapsulated everything the character was supposed to be. There's a reason 90s blockbusters took a huge turn for the darker and edgier after this came out, and the film was a merchandising monster. Back in 1989, you couldn't mosey a street corner without seeing a country mile of bat symbols everywhere, so I think it was natural to assume video games based on the film would follow. And follow, they sure indeed did. Maybe too much. This is where we are now. A game based on a movie based on comic books. I want you to close your eyes for me and imagine everything Karate Kid on NES is lying on a table. Now use all your aggressive rage and flip that stupid fucking table over, and boom, you got Batman NES. Such an incredible platformer with engaging gameplay, fun mechanics, beautiful sprite work, tricky platforming, and one banging soundtrack. It's a game that's so good, it's considered one of the core titles of the NES library by many, which at the time had never happened for a movie licensed game before. It was unreal. Now, the game is kind of weird in terms of being film accurate. The sprites and assets all look like Tim Burton's Batman, but the plot and structure don't really follow the movie until the very end of that Joker confrontation. There's a lot of weird stuff thrown in here, like new mini-bosses and whatnot, and beyond that, none of the film's soundtrack is used, which on one hand is a total shame, since I consider Danny Elfman's Batman soundtrack to be one of the best original film scores of all time, but on the other hand, the new soundtrack totally rocks. It's real boss-level stuff. It is so good. So it's weird. As a video game, 7 out of 8, fantastic, but as a movie license game, it falters in some areas, so for me, this is a rounded, I guess, 6 out of 8 nuggets.
Like I said earlier, in the late third generation, movie license games really seemed to find their footing. Because as tech got better, developers had finally discovered how to properly adapt movies into this new, different artistic medium. But there were still certainly kinks to be worked out, and I think it was clear at this point that it could go nowhere but up going forward. Oh, go fuck off somewhere else.
People always say that the 1990s were like the best time ever to be alive, and maybe they were, I don't know, I wasn't there, I was too busy not being alive for another 15 years, but despite the fact I've always thought the 90s were maybe a little overrated, you can't really discredit it at all. Like, everyone remembers the Disney animated movie renaissance most notably, but I, for one, would argue that the whole of arts and entertainment went through a renaissance during this era, for what I think at least are really obvious reasons. For one, cinema really stepped up here. I mean, after a decade of primarily just action blockbusters, which is fun and all, but kind of overplayed, we finally saw a return to the down-to-earth, serious filmmaking of the 70s to the mainstream, and it was incredible. Action blockbusters took a turn for the darker and more serious, at least for the first half of the decade, and video games, ho ho ho. I'd say the 90s were the biggest era for gaming in terms of just technological progress alone. I mean, the fact that there was only a 9-year gap between something like Dr. Mario and something like Resident Hill. Between Dr. Mario and something like Silent Hill or Resident Evil 3 is absolutely mind-breakingly nuts. With all the 3D stuff going on though, it does get really easy to kind of glance over the 4th generation consoles. After all, they are still 2D like the 3rd generation, but not only did they experiment with all kinds of crazy 3D stuff, but the specs on these allowed for so many deeper experiences. I'd honestly say the 4th generation games felt more fleshed out, more complete, more stylized, and generally hold up better than the clunky full-on 3D games of the 5th or 6th gens, which of course isn't to say that those are bad at all, but still. And now we've arrived at my one and only happy place, the Sega Genesis, my favorite video game console that looks and functions like a foot massager. God, man, I love this system. I love its darker edge, its technological ambition, its 150 meters of attitude and charm. Obviously, the 8-bit custom world was not ready for this thing, and neither was I. The Sega Genesis first showed up in 1989, and though it had a decent amount of good games, it hadn't really reached its stride yet. Like, Sonic the Hedgehog wasn't released for another 2 years, and though Sega did have its own franchises and IPs, they weren't really lighting the world on fire, so a lot of its games were movie-based, which certainly helped the system reach a more broad demographic. Alongside a beat-em-up take on Tim Burton's Batman, and another version of The Last Crusade, one of the first we got was Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Yup, it's the 90s. Now, it is pretty neat to see Michael Jackson's connection connection with Sega start here, considering how synonymous he'd become with the brand later on, and that whole Sonic 3 debacle where he was supposed to make part of the soundtrack but backed out of it, yeah, we have this to blame for that. Now, I could compare this to the movie it's based on to try and see how accurate it is, but...
No, I totally get it. You don't have to explain it to me. I get it. I got it. I understand. I just don't want to spoil it for you.
Gotta say, I love the aesthetic of the cover art. All the bright colors and shine contrast so well with the dark Sega atmosphere. It shouts Genesis at its prime from its most inner soul. The soundtrack's taken from various Michael Jackson songs. I don't know if that counts as a point for accuracy or not, but sure, I'll give it a pat here. And beyond that, all the sprite work and cutscenes look great, even if I have no damn clue what's going on.
Now, I will say this. I'm not really a big Michael Jackson guy to any extent. I mean, I recognize his talent, I recognize his influence, but it's just not really my style of thing. I mean, I couldn't tell you most of his songs, or most of his roles, or most of his music videos. I mean, hell, I even think the original Sonic 3 soundtrack before Michael Jackson's team came in and added, oh wow, carnival music but with Michael Jackson beats, I think it was better. With the exception of Hard Times, obviously, but like outside of that, I think that original soundtrack that eventually got used in Sonic Origins is generally better. But in spite of all of that, I can say this. A lot of movie licensed games do nothing but take, say, a sprite based on the movie it's based on and cram it into a game that has nothing to do with the movie. Like, say, Alien doing Pac-Man. Or even something later, like the Incredibles game. Like, sure, there's some aspects of that correlate to, say, some of the characters' superpowers or whatever, but aside from that, it's like, why is this an Incredibles game? What makes this Incredibles? It's not. There's nothing really that ties it to that source material. It doesn't have to be a game based on Incredibles. If you remove the aesthetics, if you remove the soundtrack, really it could just be a Superman game or a Fantastic Four game. But then you got something like Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, and it's not the same at all. It bleeds Michael Jackson to its very core. To its presentation, to its gameplay, to its artwork, basically everything here. It all screams Michael Jackson, and it fits Sega so well. This isn't a game where you could just pluck the guy from Die Hard out and stick him in here and boom, you got a Die Hard game. No, this was, without any question, a Michael Jackson game, and there is no doubt about it.
The plot features you, as Michael Jackson, going around beating the flip out of these bad guys and rescuing lost children. Yeah, I mean, realistically, this is probably the last guy you'd ever want going after your kids. I don't think it's ever really explained who these bad guys are, or who even kidnapped these children in the first place.
But I have my suspicions.
This is genuinely a pretty okay video game, and it did wonders for attracting people to the Genesis, since this was one of the first games you could really play as a celebrity in, especially one with the magnetism and immortality of Michael Jackson. And hey, say what you want, but I think this is one of the first movie license games that's actually better than the movie it's based on, which, I mean, it's not saying much, look what we're dealing with here. But that's a pretty big feat either way, and consistently through the fourth generation of gaming, this is something you'd start to see happening as movie-based games just kept getting better. 6 out of 8 nuggets here. And on that same note, the Sega Genesis was a pretty shocking underdog success story that housed a lot of underdog success stories within itself. It doesn't just stop with Sonic, and if you know anything, it's that there's no underdog like the $200 billion corporation that owns us all winning in the end.
I was honestly never a Disney kid at all, and I don't have any nostalgia for movies like this. I mean, I just watched Aladdin for the first time literally last year, and for me, it is a movie that is okay.
I don't really think I can truly have an objective opinion on it since I don't really love musicals that much, which I'd argue is a completely different medium of art altogether than ordinary film, but if I had to, I could say I liked how expressive the characters were. The plot was okay, the animation and settings were good, it was mostly okay, just not for me, and that's how I describe Aladdin. It's a good movie that just isn't for me. I'm definitely not the target audience here. Which is a perfectly cool and good thing, and it was obviously super popular and received a game adaptation on Sega Genesis, developed by Virgin Games. That goes without saying. My thoughts on the movie aside, this game is just... it's just wonderful. First off, it is a visual treat, and it's no shock as to why. Apparently, this was the first hand-drawn video game ever, with 10 animators working on the project to make it absolutely certain that not only does this game look great by their own quality standards, but that it matches the film's quality as well. I mean, obviously it's not one-to-one, but this is the Sega Genesis. How the hell did they do this in the first place in 1994? The game has fun, intuitive platforming, it looks great, it sounds good, it sticks to the film's plot, and it's an incredible piece of video game history, even if you're someone like me who didn't really love the movie that much. To see a movie license game like this receive so much care and attention to detail just shows the commitment, the love, the ambition, the pure itch the developers had to make true art. Art, real great art, comes from a deep passion. It shouldn't be an algorithmic nostalgia grab devoid of any real effort or presence of humanity. Art, actual art, it comes from a place of wanting to make things that people will enjoy that can even change their lives. No, I'm not necessarily calling Aladdin on Sega Genesis life-changing, but it's definitely enjoyable. They took the movie, something I didn't particularly care for because it was in a medium I didn't particularly care for, and adapted it into a medium that I actually do like. They kept what made the original work so good and so solid, but changed what wouldn't work as a game to fit the new medium. Like all great adaptations do, what all adaptations should strive to do. As we see consistently throughout the fourth generation of gaming, the developers truly tried to make a great experience, and it paid off. Aladdin on Genesis ultimately became the fourth highest selling game on the entire console. It sold more than Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It sold more than Miss Pac-Man. I don't think I can possibly even try to articulate just how insane that actually is. Of course, there was also an Aladdin adaptation for the SNES made by Capcom, and it's okay. I don't think the level design is as polished as the Genesis version. It certainly doesn't do as much new. I love sprite-based games and all. I mean, it's my favorite art style. What do you want me to say? But compare this to the sheer ambition of the Genesis game, and be honest, which one's really better? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the Super Nintendo came out, and outside of having a slightly slower processor, the Super Nintendo clowned Sega's Genesis in every single way. It packed better graphics, better sound, better color, and ultimately better power, which is kinda all that mattered back in the console war days. It all boiled down to who could do more ambitious stuff, and when it came to ambition, the SNES drifted in spades. As not only are many of its games considered the greatest ever made, but it always experimented with pseudo 3D possibilities, whether it be using pre-rendered 3D models in Donkey Kong Country, or whether it be having 3D-ish landscapes in games like F-Zero or Star Fox, or whether it be making me lose my fucking lunch in games like Jurassic Park. Ugh.
I truly do recognize that Jurassic Park is a beloved classic in film. I recognize that everyone loves it, and I recognize that it was way ahead of its time when it released to an overwhelmingly adoring public in 1993. However, I am simply unable to get into it, and am fully aware of the fact that this is merely a shitty me opinion. I have tried so many times to watch it, but once I get to around the 12-minute mark, I get bored and catch the feeling that this just really isn't my thing, so I watch 12 Angry Men instead, and I recognize that I have problems and should go to therapy. But I am a man, goddammit, and instead of going to therapy like a little bitch, I will instead sit down on my couch and watch 12 Angry Men like a little bitch.
Well, like I said, the film was a cultural phenomenon and got so many game adaptations, maybe a few too many game adaptations. The most notable of them all was the SNES one made by Ocean Software, the brilliant geniuses behind beloved classics like Waterworld, Short Circuit, Hook, and WWF European Rampage Tour. Okay, maybe I shot my chute too quick. Be that as it may though, these guys were basically the movie licensed game studio outside of LJN back in the day, and they certainly left an impact, getting bought out by Infogrames in 1996 and being swiftly forgotten about afterwards. Okay, never mind me on that one. But this game, Jurassic Park, they got a ton of praise for, though it's certainly far from the ballpark of perfection. The game has two playstyles: outside, where it's a top-down maze, and inside, where it's a first-person experience, which was really rare, though not entirely unique for Super Nintendo. Too bad we never got Tuna 3D on here. The top-down section looks really good graphically, and it plays alright enough. The first-person, though, is just weird. It's cool to have a first-person 3D game on SNES, but it just doesn't work super well. It's really primitive in how it tries to do 3D, which I totally understand. It's the Super Nintendo, but that still doesn't completely excuse it. In terms of film accuracy, no clue, but you give me dinosaurs, I give you money. I have the mental capacity of a 13-year-old in 1993, and I know damn well how to use it. It's a decent game on the surface, but it does have a major issue in that there's no save feature, no save files, no password feature, no nothing, no nod. On NES or Genesis, that was pretty common and maybe excusable, but on SNES, no chance. That's a huge detriment to society, especially considering how long this game is. But you know what else was a huge detriment to society? The original Raiders of the Lost Ark game on Atari. That was something else. No, after that, they just didn't give up. No. After that, they made this terrible terrible sorry attempt at Temple of Doom on NES that's not even worth bringing to the light of day. And then there were like 5,000 games based on Last Crusade, but it wasn't until the mid-90s that we actually got a game adapting all 3 films onto one cartridge, Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures. Aw, it's okay, buddy, they didn't mean it. The game was developed by JVC along with... Welcome back, my dear old friend. It bears a lot of similarities to the Super Star Wars trilogy, which makes all the sense. Same developers, same engine, same console, and it released the same year as Super Return of the Jedi. The Super Star Wars trilogy of games and Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures are no doubt among my favorite movie licensed games ever. I adore these games. They have such an authentic arcade twang to them, what with their flashy style, all while being these simple yet masterful home platformers. Beyond that, the graphics, soundtracks, and cutscenes fit the feel of these games and the movies they're based on so well, and obviously look great. The gameplay is fun, it's engaging, it feels like the respective franchises they're pulling off, and the games even go out of their comfort zone to follow the plots of the films, like with these non-platforming vehicle bits which feel right at home on the dimension-bending Super Nintendo. The Star Wars games are really difficult, even on easy mode, while Indiana Jones is a bit easier, but aside from that, these games feel like they're a part of the same series, which I guess they more or less are, and frankly, I know it'll never happen, but I'd love to see a return to this formula, or at least to have these games return in some form beyond Super Star Wars trilogy being at the At Games Arcade Legends Ultimate cabinet, which honestly just feels right at home for them. I mean, these games scream arcade cabinet to me. Alongside the LEGO games, these are the best straight adaptations of the Star Wars and Indiana Jones movies there are, and this is the kind of love and attention to detail I love seeing adaptations get. 8 out of 8 nuggets right here. Well, let's get serious for a second here. When you think of movie licensed games, probably the first thing that pops in your head is the gross landfill of adaptations of CGI animated kids movies, which wasn't really a thing until 1995 when gunshots were heard around the world. Nope, not that. Bingo. Toy Story lit the world on fire, so whenever Disney releases a mediocre animated film or a wildfire engulfs the West Coast in flames, you have John Lasseter to thank for that. Sure, 3D animation existed before Toy Story, but not anywhere near this scale, and there certainly hadn't been a full 3D CG movie at this point.
Again, it's a great example of game and film mirroring each other. In the early mid-90s, there was so much intrigue into this newfangled 3D technology, both in game and in film. I mean, everyone saw it as the future. They considered all this 2D stuff nothing but relics of the past, as this archaic medium to rot, to be left in the dust when we all moved on to the 3D utopia of the near future. Not unlike black and white and film, which obviously wasn't true, not for any of these mediums. 2D gaming was, and still is, a great form of art, capable of providing a different experience than 3D games can, and that's important. Black and white can look much more compelling and meaningful than full color can at times, and can sometimes have its own meaning tied to it entirely. And 2D animations can accomplish so many different expressions and imaginative ideas compared to 3D. That's not to say 3D is bad in any way, it's not to say that full color in film is bad. I'm not at all trying to say that, that'd be fucking stupid, but it's like, the old stuff isn't bad either. It's good to have both because they can all do so many different things.
But this idea, this thought, that 3D was the only viable way for non-live action entertainment, it never truly went away. As soon as 3D became accessible, 2D went way into the background. For games, the only times you'd really see a 2D game was on like Game Boy, and for animated content, it was never in movies. Typically, it was just whatever Saturday morning cartoon kids watched in the early aughts, or those weird, terrible straight-to-DVD movies, and this lasted like a solid decade or so. 2D definitely had a big comeback in around 2009 with games like New Super Mario Bros. And movies like Princess and the Frog, but people still look down on 2D even if they don't realize it. When games like Metroid Dread or Sonic Superstars or Super Mario Bros. Wonder were announced to be $60 at launch, there were revolutions in the streets, even though I'd definitely argue that those puny 2D games had more content and were better crafted than many of their 3D counterparts. And that's what the whole of the early 90s, the whole of the fourth generation was leading up to, all-out 3D graphics. The SNES and Genesis did crazy pseudo 3D stuff all the time, and 3D games themselves finally took off in the fifth generation around 1994 or 95, which is when 3D movies also started to come into existence. Toy Story really was a trailblazer, and you kinda gotta give it a ton of credit, not just for being the first super mainstream 3D movie, not just for being the first Pixar film, not just for being what more than likely will burn down my house in a couple of months, but for starting the whole modern animated movie genre, the whole exploring the hidden world of some inanimate object type thing. Again, I don't know if that's praise or criticism, but take it as you will. It was a no-brainer that a juggernaut like this would get game spin-offs aplenty, most notably one for Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Essentially the same game across both versions. In 1995, well after the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn were out. That's kinda hilarious to me, this groundbreaking movie that broke the metaphorical chains of 2D being forced right back into those supposed chains of outdated 2D consoles. In spite of that though, this is the type of game that makes me think the fourth generation and movie licensed games as a whole are grossly underrated. Like sure, nowadays people only really remember this game for having just terrible, unspeakably dog shit edging on Woody, but it's a great display of the 4th gen system's power, graphics, and 3D capabilities, which are so often overlooked. The game at its core is still a 2D platformer, I know, big shock, right? But it tries as much as possible to carry out the movie's plot, and instead of doing something like the Super Star Wars trilogy where it breaks this game's mold for the sake of accuracy, or games like Alien that suck, Toy Story adapts the gameplay to fit the story. It still maintains the 2D side-scrolling shtick almost the whole way through. There's even a boss fight here with a demonic space Nazi dude that was cut from the film, so whether that counts as inaccurate or hyper-accurate, I don't really know. But this game earns an easy 7 out of 8 nuggets, for sure. Oh yeah, the whole dual release thing exists.
How would you like your disinfectant wipes? Orange scented or lavender?
For like 20 straight years, games would come to handheld systems with the same name as a console variant, but it was always a completely different game entirely, and almost always a huge downgrade with some rare exceptions, and yeah, movie licensed games are always the biggest perpetrator of this. There's not really a point in bringing up most of these, however, I do want to mention that Batman on Game Boy gave Batman a gun, which is something I'm confident fans would react to very calmly and extremely rationally in this day and age. What we've been building up to all this time has finally arrived. This is fully 3D gaming. What had only been a dream, a vision, a mere idea once thought to be just as impossible as teleportation had now arrived and was widely accessible, even before 3D animated films were. What awaits us are 4 consoles, 4 systems that transition gamers from the comfort and familiarity of 2D into the home of my shiny new favorite axis. The Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, and Atari Jaguar. What awaits us are 3 consoles, 3 systems that transition gamers from the comfort and familiarity of 2D into the home of my shiny new favorite axis, the Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and Nintendo 64. Was Atari's godforsaken heart, but the Jaguar was discontinued before the N64 even came out and left next to no impact on anyone or anything in any way whatsoever at all. Sony was now a competitor in the console war after, you guessed it, getting jilted by both Nintendo and Sega and was taking the world by storm, now breaking and setting new records never before seen in gaming, but was also so oversaturated with games that it was starting to get a little disillusioning. The N64 had more power than the competition did and had a mountaintop of some of the greatest games of all time, but was stuck way in the past because of its cartridges and had the opposite of Sony's problem. They didn't have enough games coming out all the time to keep people engaged. The Sega Saturn lasted longer than the Confederacy, which is at least more than I can say for the Atari Jaguar, and that's where movie licensed games, the unsung heroes of the 5th generation of gaming, showed up, showed big, and showed out. I genuinely love the very visible, very drastic change you see these games go through during the retro age. I mean, they start off as these cheap, rushed cash grabs in the 2nd generation, then throughout the 3rd generation you see them slowly but surely develop into these true works of art made by passionate creators, both with an undeniable love for the source material and an undeniable love for the medium of video games, to the point that in the 4th generation some of these games become synonymous with their respective consoles, and in the 5th generation they become more integral than ever. In an age where PlayStation games were kinda all over the place, these games based on popular movies helped unify gamers and gave them a mutual shared experience. In an age where Nintendo was releasing like 3 games per year, these high-quality movie-based games filling out the empty space in the title library actually gave people something good to play. And in an age where Sega Saturn was still in the market somehow, we got Street Fighter, the movie, the video game. This is where we are now, a video game based on a movie, based on a video game. The N64, I think, had the most iconic movie-based games of this era and was home to 4 different Star Wars games, 2 of which being based on everyone's most favoriteest film ever. I mean, at least it beat Star Trek the Motion Picture. Honestly, I've always considered The Phantom Menace to be maybe the most overhated movie ever, but that isn't to say that I love it or that it's great or even all that good at all. No, I actually think it's kind of the worst Star Wars film. The 2nd worst Star Wars film, for sure. But seeing this on some of the worst movies ever made lists is just, like, have you guys ever seen a truly bad movie? Have you ever even witnessed a true disaster piece of nature? No, Phantom Menace isn't one of the worst movies ever. Sure, there's a lot of bad stuff here. The CGI definitely left a lot to be desired. The flying half-eaten donut ship in the sky was kind of dumb. The racist accents were maybe a bit too much. The characters are extremely empty slate, and there's borderline no real character building or deep storytelling going on. The Chosen One trope wasn't my favoriteest thing ever, and the film has, in my opinion, the single most worthless fucking plot twist of all time.
I am Queen Amidala.
Yeah, and I'm a white guy.
Overall though, I do think the good does outweigh the bad, even if only slightly. There was so much technological ambition here. I enjoy all the politics and world building, the soundtrack speaks for itself, as do the action sequences, and it brings so many new and interesting ideas to the Star Wars world. Like pod racing for one. The Phantom Menace games on N64 are weird, since neither of them have you play through the actual events of the movie. No, instead they take segments from the movie and turn them into their own thing. For example, there's Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, a racing game has turned out to be a major defining title for the N64. It doesn't replace Mario Kart 64 or F-Zero X or Diddy Kong's Racing or Excitebike 64, not at all. But it certainly feels like its own thing and was another great arcade-style racing romp fit straight for the fun machine. This isn't a game everyone loves, but I do. It not only nails pod racing as seen in the Phantom Menace, but it's also just a fun experience on its own. This is definitely a game you don't even have to be a Star Wars fan to enjoy to the fullest. The other Phantom Menace game, Battle for Naboo, is a bit of an odd cat. It's kind of a movie license game since it's named after the movie, it's based off a battle from the movie, and its graphics look about the same as the movie, but it has its own storyline and content as well. It's a spiritual successor to Star Wars Rogue Squadron on N64, but set in a different era of Star Wars, so whether it's a movie license game or not is really up to you to decide. But either way, it kicks absolute ass. Both of these games are good, solid 6 out of 8 nugget games in my book. But when it comes to movie license games kicking absolute ass, nothing is more revered than the King of the Mountain itself. No N64 collection is completely complete without GoldenEye 007, the very golden standard for movie licensed games. This game revolutionized first-person shooters in ways players didn't even think were possible back in '97. It was so good that it even overshadowed the movie it was based on. Like, no one ever talks about the 1995 GoldenEye movie. Who cares? I've seen Lines of Traffic more interesting than that flick. But thousands and thousands of people are still playing GoldenEye 007 and talking about it every single day, and it's one of the few bygone movie license games that's still consistently brought back to modern platforms solely because of how damn great it was and still is. This is without question the most important movie license game ever made, as it came out at a time when Nintendo wasn't really putting out much of anything, and all of a sudden here comes this super fun, super innovative game you can play with your friends. A game that had enough content and enough steam to keep you entertained for months. A game that actually gave you a reason to turn on your 3D dust brick every once in a while. Playing it nowadays makes you realize, yeah, it's definitely not aged as well as balsamic vinegar, but back in the day it was way ahead of its time, and it paved the roads for all the first-person shooting games we have today. When people say adaptations are always these trashy, low-effort cash grabs, this is the first game I point to prove otherwise. It is a resounding 8 out of 8 nuggets. The 5th generation was such a trying time for the game industry. Sure, the PlayStation was the most popular console ever, but outside of that, everything seemed so uncertain. Nintendo and Sega were both going under, Atari was deader than dead, PlayStation was kinda all over the place in terms of its title library, and overall, 3D was still very much in its infancy phase. But this generation's movie license games truly presented a way forward for gaming. They showed what 3D was truly capable of, and they provided experiences that appealed to so many people, and I think they're really undervalued for that. Yeah, sure, there were still a good number of low-effort adaptations here, but I don't think that takes away from all the good ones. There were hundreds of low-effort games that weren't even adaptations, but it was just the movie-based ones that received that stigma, which is just so unfair. There's this idea that movie license games can't be good, they can't be art, because all they're supposed to do is sell the product, to make a buck, and that's just not true at all. Why are any video games made in the first place, or movies for that matter? It's to make money. It's always to make money. Even a wannabe indie guy like myself can't imagine life without, well, trying to make art. Even the most passionate industry veterans, everyone's gotta make a living somehow. Most artists just choose to do that by doing the thing that they love, and it's not any different here. Just because movie license games are adaptations doesn't mean they can't be real art, and these 5th gen games prove that more than anything. They showed doubters back then, and they still show doubters now, that movie-based games aren't cursed, they aren't all bad, and that when backed by passionate teams and developers, they can truly become great art.
I take it back. I take all of it back.